darkness blankets the Yemeni skies, a deadly silence hanging over the space before the firestorm descends. At 50,000 feet, the belly of the Ghost B-2 Spirit opens, unleashing silent destroyers. The ground shakes violently as massive GBU-57 bunker busters tear through the toughest underground fortifications. There was no radar warning, no sirens, only total destruction arriving in the blink of an eye. A massive pillar of fire rises from the earth, marking the end for the enemy's secret weapon depots. For months, the vital shipping lanes of the Red Sea have been strangled by relentless attacks. Houthi ballistic missiles and suicide drones have repeatedly targeted innocent commercial vessels without mercy. Diplomatic warnings were ignored, and red lines were repeatedly crossed in a reckless manner. But tonight, Washington's strategic patience has officially run out and given way to military action. These stealth bombers flew directly from Missouri to execute a brutal punishment mission that is unprecedented in history. These are no longer minor warnings, but a large-scale campaign designed to completely wipe out the enemy's combat capabilities. What happens when the strategic air power of the United States is truly and fully unleashed? Can externally supported air defense systems stop the invisible ghosts of the sky? Fasten your seatbelts, we are entering the simulation scenario. 90 minutes of terror in the Middle East. It all began at the National Military Command Center deep beneath the Pentagon. High-resolution satellite imagery confirmed the exact locations of the underground missile silos. Houthi forces believed that 20 meters of reinforced concrete under the mountain would protect them. But they forgot that the United States possesses weapons designed specifically for this scenario. The attack order was encrypted and sent directly to Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. Pilots of the 509th Bomb Wing quietly stepped into the cockpit in the freezing night. 3 B-2 Spirits, monsters worth $2 billion each, began taxiing onto the runway. Jet engines roared, lifting the black ghosts into the sky, heading toward the other side of the Earth. The flight, lasting dozens of hours, required absolute focus and continuous aerial refueling. Upon approaching Middle East airspace, maximum stealth mode was activated to ensure secrecy. To the enemy's air defense radar, this massive aircraft appeared no larger than a swallow. Iran-supplied air defense systems scanned the sky but remained completely blind to the approaching threat. American pilots calmly checked the target list for the last time before entering the kill zone. The primary target was the underground tunnel network in Sana'a, hiding the most dangerous long-range ballistic missiles. The weapon bay doors opened, revealing the massive GBU-57 MOP bombs weighing 13 tons. This is the only non-nuclear bomb in the world capable of penetrating 60 meters of reinforced concrete. The bombs detached from the aircraft, guided by GPS with absolute precision down to the centimeter. Below ground, Houthi commanders were still discussing plans for the next cargo ship attack. They had no idea that death was plunging down upon their heads at supersonic speeds. The first bomb hit the ground, but it did not detonate immediately on the surface. It drilled deep into the earth like a deadly auger, piercing through layers of rock and protective concrete. A millisecond later, the delayed fuse was triggered deep inside the command center. The explosion created an artificial earthquake, shaking the entire mountain violently as if it were about to collapse. The immense pressure from the blast tore apart everything inside the bunker, from humans to machinery. Flames erupted from the ventilation shafts, turning the entire base into a massive incinerator. Simultaneously, the other 2 B-2 seconds dropped bombs on missile depots scattered across the valley. Secondary explosions occurred successively as hundreds of enemy missile warheads were detonated. The Yemeni night sky lit up like day as columns of fire hundreds of meters high rose furiously. Houthi communication systems were completely paralyzed, throwing ground units into a state of extreme panic. They tried to activate air defense missile launchers, but the radars could not lock onto any targets. The B-2 Spirits completed their mission and turned back to Diego Garcia Base in silence. This was a perfect surgical strike, eliminating the enemy's strategic attack capability in an instant. Subsequent satellite imagery showed the bunker entrances completely collapsed, burying all ambitions underneath. The US sent a stern message: no bunker is deep enough to escape this wrath. However, War never ends easily after just the first wave of attacks. Surviving Houthi units began to regroup, their fear quickly turning into vengeful rage. Foreign military advisors activated contingency plans, preparing for a bloody counterattack. In the Red Sea, U.S. Navy destroyers began detecting strange signals on their radar screens. The artificial calm has ended, giving way to a real firestorm that is about to strike. The most brutal asymmetric war of the 21st century is about to enter a new phase. The night over the Red Sea was torn apart by white smoke trails rising from rugged ravines. Despite suffering heavy losses, Houthi forces still had trump cards hidden carefully away. Foreign military advisors quickly took control and activated the Wolfpack attack protocol. From camouflaged civilian trucks, 30 Shahed suicide drones took off simultaneously. Following them were 10 anti-ship ballistic missiles, soaring into the atmosphere at Mach 5 speed. Their target was none other than the U.S. carrier strike group patrolling offshore. Aboard the destroyer USS Carney, the ANSPY-1D phased array radar suddenly flashed red alerts. The piercing Vampire alarm echoed throughout the ship's combat information center. This is the nightmare every crew fears, a multi-dimensional saturation attack. The Aegis combat system immediately switched to auto mode, calculating trajectories for dozens of targets. The vertical launch system hatches on the foredeck popped open, revealing deadly launch tubes. A wall of fire erupted as a salvo of SM-2 and SM-6 interceptor missiles left the launchers. The night sky turned into a deadly fireworks display with consecutive blinding explosions. Cheap drones were shredded by American missiles worth millions of dollars each. This is the cruel paradox of asymmetric warfare, using gold to shoot down stones. However, the enemy numbers were too great, and a few ballistic missiles breached the first defense layer. Medium-range ESSM missiles were launched, intercepting warheads diving down at dizzying speeds. As the distance closed to just a few miles, 127mm naval guns began firing to create a wall of flak. But the real threat remained: 2 suicide drones skimming the sea surface to evade radar. The Phalanx CIWS rapid-fire gun system, the last line of defense, automatically swiveled toward the targets. The chainsaw-like roar of the Phalanx erupted, spewing a rain of tungsten rounds at 4,500 rounds per minute. One drone was blown apart in midair, less than 500 meters from the ship. The other was hit, but momentum still slammed it into the destroyer's port side. A massive explosion rocked the ship, metal shrapnel tearing through the steel hull and igniting fires. Damage control teams immediately rushed to the scene, fighting the flames amidst the stench of gunpowder. Although the ship did not sink, images of a smoking U.S. warship spread across the world. In Washington, generals realized that passive defense is never a long-term solution. The price of sitting back, waiting, and intercepting is too high and full of risks. A new strategic decision was made. It was time to shift from defense to total destruction. Other superpowers like Russia and China were closely watching every development of this naval battle. They were analyzing the effectiveness of Western weapons against cheap swarm tactics. But the U.S. still had an unplayed card to reclaim its honor and dominant position. From the deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford, stealth F-35C fighters began to start up. Their mission was not to intercept, but to hunt down and destroy the source of the attack. The cat-and-mouse game at sea was over. Now it was time for the hunters of the sky. The Red Sea is boiling, and the balance of power is about to be tipped once again. As the first light of dawn broke over the water, the image of the smoking destroyer triggered a true fury. The United States decided to stop playing cat and mouse. It was time to deliver the steel punch to end the war. On the flight deck of the supercarrier USS Gerald R. Ford, the EMAU's electromagnetic catapult system was operating at full capacity. The stealth F-35C Lightning II fighters were launched into the sky one by one, carrying a search and destroy mission. Unlike the earlier B-2 bombers, the F-35C acts as the quarterback of the network-centric battlefield. Their multi-mission sensor systems began sweeping up every electromagnetic signal emitting from the Yemeni coast. The trucks carrying drone launchers, which had hidden in caves after firing, were now exposed. Data fusion technology allowed American pilots to see through camouflage and the remaining darkness. Without needing to penetrate too deep, pilots launched AGM-154 JSOW smart glide weapons from a safe distance. These silent glide bombs swooped down on their targets like brutal hunting falcons. At the same time, from the deep sea, an Ohio-class nuclear submarine began to join the symphony of destruction. A volley of 50 Tomahawk Block V cruise missiles tore through the water, heading straight for logistics hubs. The target this time was not just weapons, but the blood fueling the war. Fuel depots and seaports. At the port of Hodeidah, cranes and warehouses suspected of storing smuggled Iranian weapons were completely flattened. Horrifying chain reactions of explosions turned the strategic port area into a pile of charred scrap metal. On land, rushing supply convoys could not escape the eyes of the Reaper. B-2 small-diameter bombs automatically sought out heat sources from truck engines and destroyed them with absolute precision. Houthi air defense systems, already partially paralyzed, now completely collapsed under the overwhelming power. Enemy military commanders realized they had nowhere left to hide and nothing left to fight with. In less than 2 hours, the combat capability of a powerful armed force was wiped back to the Stone Age. This was a total game changer. Shifting from guerrilla harassment to unilateral destruction, images of the terrible devastation were transmitted live to major capitals around the world. Beijing and Moscow, observing from afar, were forced to reevaluate their own strategic calculations. They saw that the US relies not just on ship numbers, but on integration and unimaginable precision strike capability. The price of challenging a US carrier strike group is too high, potentially even the regime's survival. Gunfire gradually fell silent over the Red Sea, leaving only the sound of waves lapping against shipwrecks and drifting debris. US naval aviation proved that they could re-establish order in just a single morning. International shipping lanes were reopened, but under the strict surveillance of guns that had just fired. A new order was established, where deterrence was no longer empty words, but written in firepower and steel. The simulated war ended, leaving behind a bloody lesson on the disparity of class in modern warfare. The sun slowly rises over the barren peaks of Yemen, illuminating ruins that are still smoking heavily. Silence covers the battlefield, creating a terrifying contrast to the fierce firestorm that occurred last night. The punitive campaign has ended, but its geopolitical shockwaves will shake this region for decades to come. What remains of a military force that once challenged the world is now just twisted piles of scrap metal. Decades of weapon accumulation and bunker construction were completely wiped out in less than a single day and night. This outcome is a brutal reminder of the terrible disparity between a superpower and non-state armed groups. When deterrence fails, force speaks. And when the United States truly strikes, the price is often total destruction. Shipping lanes in the Red Sea have been cleared, and commercial vessels resume their journeys in safety. But that sense of safety is built on the foundation of overwhelming firepower and the permanent presence of the US Navy. In Tehran, Moscow, and Beijing, military strategists are having to rewrite their assessment reports. They realize that stealth technology and long-range precision strike capabilities remain the trump cards that decide the game. Modern warfare is no longer a race of soldier numbers, but a race of information and reaction speed. Peace is a fragile concept. It can only be maintained when the balance of power is not broken by miscalculations. Today's scenario is a simulation, but the weapons and tactics mentioned are all existing realities. We are living in a volatile era, where the line between a military exercise and total war is very thin. Never underestimate the determination to protect the world order of those who hold nuclear power in their hands. The Red Sea story closes here, but future scenarios are still waiting ahead. Will humanity learn the lesson, or will history repeat the bloody mistakes of the past? Thank you for watching this simulation analysis. Stay vigilant and observe the world with us.